Its first major appeal for funding related to humanitarian efforts in the aftermath of the devastating Cyclone Idai. The appeal of $282 million for Mozambique will cover provisions of water, food, sanitation and education for the hundreds of thousands affected by the storm, but only for the next 3 months. Earlier, UN Secretary General António Guterres urged the international community to quickly fund emergency aid appeals for Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi, saying they have suffered one of the worst weather-related catastrophes in the history of Africa.
Have been washed away in places we have yet to reach. There are reports that $1 billion worth of infrastructure has been destroyed. And in many of the affected areas, electricity remains out. Goods are scarce or unaffordable. In Beira, a box of tomatoes that cost about 500 meticals 1 week ago now costs up to 5 times that much. And while a break in the downpours is welcome news, the risk of further rains and flooding remains. Today, I want to reiterate my complete solidarity with the people and governments of Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi. Emergency teams from the United Nations and our partners were on the ground from the start of the crisis. Under extremely difficult conditions, we have been airdropping emergency kits that contain food, medicine, water purification gear and shelter to communities that are still stranded by the flood waters. We have reached 100,000 people with food assistance and are scaling up to reach many, many more. The head of the World Food Programme is traveling to Mozambique as we speak. We are flying drones to support disaster management authorities as they map up needs across the affected areas. And we are racing to prevent the spread of potentially deadly diseases. Stagnant waters, lack of hygiene and overcrowding are breeding grounds for diseases such as diarrhea, cholera and malaria. And we have heard today the appeal of the Mozambican minister related to cholera. And we are working to protect children and ensure as little disruption to their education as possible. I want to pay tribute to the humanitarian colleagues who are working around the clock to gain access to people in need, including in previously cut-off areas. Our efforts are now turning to life-saving aid and reconstruction. The UN Central Emergency Response Fund immediately allocated $20 million to help kickstart the response, in a decision that was immediately taken by my Under-Secretary General Mark Lowcock. Other countries have indicated support for which we are grateful. However, far more is needed. Yesterday, we launched the $281.7 million revised flash appeal for Mozambique, which is a scale-up emergency, the most severe. The revised appeal for Zimbabwe and the response plan from the government of Malawi will be issued in the days ahead. On Thursday in Geneva, we will be able to brief the donor community and all member states. And I call on the international community to fund these appeals quickly and fully so that aid agencies can urgently ramp up their responses. Let me also underscore that Cyclone Idai was an uncommonly fierce and prolonged storm, yet another alarm bell about the dangers of climate change, especially in vulnerable, at-risk countries. Such events are becoming more frequent, more severe and devastating, and more widespread, and these will only get worse if we do not act now.
In other news, the Democratic Republic